In 1749, Giacomo Justerini and George Johnson formed Justerini and Johnson wine merchants in London. It has been seen that amongst their wine stash, they also had some casks of whiskey. Now, in 1831, a man named Albert Brooks bought George Johnson's half the company, turning the company into Justerini Brooks. They did have a Justerini Brooks club whiskey in the 1880s and 1890s, but it wasn't until post-Prohibition in the United States that they developed J&B Rare to compete with a very popular Cutty Sark. Like Cutty Sark, it was a light, nutty style whiskey that was supposed to appeal to the American palate. The two whiskeys competed quite a bit over the years. In 1962, Cutty Sark sold 1 million cases of whiskey, and in 1963, J&B Rare sold 1 million cases of whiskey. Now, in 1962, Justerini Brooks was purchased by International Distillers and Vintners. 10 years later, IDV was then bought by Watney Mann, which in turn was consumed by Grand Metropolitan. 25 years later, Guinness merged with Grand Metropolitan in 1997 to form Diageo. What is the deal with J&B Jet 12-year-old? Well, it's not a significant piece of whiskey history. In fact, it's one of those releases that sort of came and went. I believe it was around for less than 15 years. It was discontinued in 2006. Perhaps it was inspired by other very successful whiskey companies' black labels. Johnnie Walker, Jack Daniels, Evan Williams, Jim Beam Black. But here, what's different about this one is this significant, heavy obsidian bottle. Light does not permeate it. You cannot see how much whiskey is in the bottle. So I have no idea. But it definitely has a cork at the top because it started breaking loose as soon as I picked this up out of the closet. So let's open it up and drink it. As I mentioned, J&B Jet 12-year-old isn't a particularly old whiskey. But let's figure out just when this whiskey was bottled. The liquid volume is measured in milliliters. The alcohol volume is measured in alcohol by volume, not proof. The back label has both a government warning and a UPC code. Taking all these aspects into consideration, this whiskey was bottled in 1990 or later. The whiskey has a bottling code printed on the bottom of the bottle. J&B Jet was discontinued in 2006. This bottle code style does not match what Diageo was using in the mid-aughts, nor does it match what Diageo was using in the early aughts. It may be that this bottling code was used by Grand Metropolitan before that company merged with Guinness to form Diageo. So that would make this whiskey from 1997 or earlier. But just to be safe, I'm going to say this bottle of whiskey was bottled in the 1990s. J&B Jet, 12-year-old whiskey. This next part might upset some viewers, so avert your eyes if you're feeling a little sensitive. You may be asking yourself or shouting at the screen, why are you pouring old whiskey onto ice? Blends historically have not been designed for this kind of sniffing and sipping. They've been designed for this kind of sniffing and sipping. Doesn't mean it's going to be any better, but we'll see. It's not forbidding and dark like the bottle is. There's apples, pears, vanilla, caramel, and roasted barley, toffee pudding, frosted flakes, frosted mini wheats, key lime pie, like from the key lime cream all the way through into the crust. Cheers. Not bad. There is vanilla and caramel coming from American oak, but there is a really nice citrusy note, somewhere between limes and oranges. It's this almost clementine orange note that lasts right on through into the finish. There is a growing note of golden raisins. It is bereft of smoke, but it still has this nice solid underpinning of mature malt whiskey and mature grain whiskey. This still has some viscosity to it. This still has a little bit of oiliness to it, which is great. The finish is warm with the clementines and the baking spices. The finish has some length to it too, which is a surprise coming from a 40% ABV blend from Diageo. Skål. I don't know if it's from peated whiskey or from the cask or it's just my imagination, but the ice actually does something to it that brings out the smoke note. The whiskey sweetens up a lot on the rocks. It is a real sweetie. Almost too sweet for my palate. To conclude, I like J&B Jet 12-year-old bitter in the Glencairn than on the rocks. On the rocks, it gets very sweet and full of vanilla, very easy for someone who wants no whiskey challenge. And the Glencairn shows texture. It shows maturity and age a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me if Diageo had some underproof casks that they mixed into this, if they had to get rid of it. For instance, if you have a cask of Knock-and-Dough single malt, but the cask lost a lot of alcohol and it's down below 40%, let's say it's at 38 or 37%, they can't bottle it as a single malt and call it whiskey because the ABV is below 40%. But they can blend it into a blend to hide it in there. And I wouldn't doubt if there is some older underproof whiskey in here because of the hints of richness in the nose, because there is some real texture. It's unfortunate that they had to discontinue this because it's such an improvement over J&B Rare.
Papa.
Sounds like my time is up.